Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the R3 Podcast, Rescue, Rebuild, Restore. As always, this is a joint venture between Operation Restored Warrior and Encounter Online. And I know I say this every single episode, but this is going to be a great episode. I'm here with my friend Mark Patrick. He is an incredibly gifted artist and sculptor. And more than that, he has a lot of stories to tell. And so I'm super excited to get to hang out with him. Thank you so much, Mark, for being here. Dealing with the technical difficulties, thank you very much.
Absolutely, I'm honored.
Well, I want to hear from you because of your journey from a wounded heart to total freedom to bringing freedom to others. That's really what we're all about in the R3 Podcast, seeing hearts rescued, rebuilt, and restored. But I think to get to that story of what you're doing today, we really have to understand where you came from. Can you tell us, where did your journey with Jesus begin?
Wow, that's a tall order. So
I look forward to it. This is a great story.
So growing up, it was pretty rough. My parents were both alcoholic, and so for work, my dad would put me to work on construction sites cleaning up. When I was 13, that progressed into becoming an apprentice in a trade, a construction trade. And so I was on this hospital. We were working on this hospital together with us, like 13, 14 other guys. And they brought a new guy on, and he was this little short guy. And I'd never been raised with the gospel of any kind. I mean, nothing. I mean, I was told I was a Catholic because I went to a funeral, but that was it. I mean, my dad had me trained to make the perfect martini kind of a thing. I mean, I could make drinks, and I drank a ton too. But so this new guy comes on the job, and all he would do on break time is take his Bible out and he would read it, and it just drove me out of my mind. I couldn't stand. I wanted to beat him. I mean, I don't even know why I wanted to beat him. So, every lunch he would go off and read it. And so I started calling him names and, making fun of him and bullying him. And he took it and he took it and he took it. So long story short, we started getting laid off because the job was coming to an end. And the superintendent came in and he's handing out checks and he goes, but I want you and Bart to still work. Patrick and Bart work. And I go, well, I'm not going to work with that guy. He's a Bible thumper. I don't want nothing to do with it. So and that's when he spoke up. He goes, Patrick, he goes, it's okay. I won't say a word about the Bible. I won't say a word about anything. He goes, just do your job. And they put him in charge of me. Do your job and we'll get along fine. Well, at the time I needed the money. So I'm like, okay, but if you say one word, I'm going to kick your ass, So he was real quiet on the job for a long time, and he was up on a scaffold. I was throwing material up to him, and I'd just watched that movie, Samson, and he had long hair, and he was ripped, and he killed everybody with a jawbone, and that's the only story I really knew about the Bible. And I said,
"Oh wow,
hey, Bible boy, tell me about Samson." And he goes, "Are you serious?" And I go, "Yeah." So he came down the scaffold, and he took the story of Samson and followed it all the way up to the blood of Jesus.
He wasn't going to miss this opportunity.
He crammed it all in there, man. And I'd never heard of those stories. I'd never heard of the Gospels. I'd never heard of that Jesus loved you and all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's really good. Wow. So, we became kind of friends, but that was about it. So the job continued. We were both getting laid off, and he knew all about me because I'd bounce all night in a bar, and then I'd work all day. I was always stoned, and I usually always hungover. And so he goes, Patrick, I know all about you. Let me show you who I am. And I said, that'd be great. So he brought us his photo album, and I'm flipping through it, and I go, oh, you were in Vietnam? And he goes, yes, I was. And then here he is in a chopper, with an M16, looking out, and I'm flipping through, and I go, man, you were quite the BA, and this last page, and he's holding up two big rings. I mean, I can't do it on the screen, but they were big rings, two of them like this. And they looked like they had mushrooms on each one. And I go, what are those? And he goes, those are all my kills. I said, your kills?
Wow.
So he would take an ear off of every kill.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm like, well, what were you, a sniper? And he goes, no, I was a tunnel rat. So they would, because he was small, they would put him in tunnels, and he would go in there with just a 45 and a bayonet and take everybody out. So I'm sitting here going, man, I used to pick on you in front of all the guys. Why didn't you do something? Why didn't you take me out? I said, I can box, but you're an outright killer. And he goes, God has a job for you, and I'm not going to get in the way of that. So I'm like, okay. So then we partied, the job was over, and he goes, before we go, I want to give you something. And he wrote a little prayer on my matches, because I had my cigarettes rolled up in my sleeve and my matches, and he ripped that cover off, and I put it in my wallet, and I go, yeah, that's really cool, thanks. And that was it. So I went back to my crazy life, and he went to another job, and about a year, maybe 2 years later, I'm not even sure how old I was, maybe 22. Yeah, so I was in my bathroom after a night of fighting, and washing blood off my knuckles, some splatter on my face, and I looked in the mirror, and I saw someone I did not like anymore. I hated. I always had a problem with hating myself, so I remembered that night that to pull that little prayer out that he gave me, and I prayed that thing, and I got radically saved. Radically.
That's outrageous, man. I
All
mean,
by my.
wow. I mean, I want to hear stories like this. I mean, I just want to, you just keep going. I just want to keep hearing about this.
Okay, so let me get to the really killer.
Oh, okay. Right on.
So I got out of the trade probably about when I was in I got out of the trade a couple of years after that, and I started so I was I gotta back up. So I was working on the Alaska pipeline.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, and
Your
so
life, man.
I had a really bad knee injury, working, and which was all fake. I just wanted to workman's comp, right? And they flew me to Salt Lake City. I did have a bad knee though, and we were playing baseball 3 o'clock in the morning, drunk and stoned, and because the sun goes like this, it doesn't go up and over, so it's just a party every night up there on the pipeline. And so they flew me home. I had surgery on my right knee, and so during that time, I'm drinking myself to death on a ranch in Colorado near Deckers, and that was basically my plan. I'm just going to drink myself to death.
And this is after you'd become a follower of Jesus.
Yeah. I only lasted 6 months with the whole Jesus group thing, because all my friends would left me. All my girlfriends wouldn't have anything to do with me. I mean, they were like, "You're a Jesus,"
and you didn't have any support.
None. So I'm like, well, this isn't worth it. And I remember grabbing my shovel, and I started digging my way back into hell. So now fast forward to the Alaska pipeline, and all that happens, and it was time to go back to work or to another job wherever I wanted to go, because all we had to do was make a phone call, and we could work anywhere in the country. And I said, Lord, and here hey, remember me, I'm on my knees, it's been a long time since I've talked to you, but I don't want to go back. If I go back, I know I'm next. And a lot of my friends have been killed or cirrhosis or knife fights and stuff. And so, I hadn't talked to him in a long time, and I heard his voice plain as day, and he goes, Mark, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. I've always wanted to be an artist. And he goes, you are one. I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah, right. And so I put that on a shelf, right? Because you don't just go, yeah, poof, okay, I am. But then a couple of weeks later, I went to the mall, and, that's when malls were popular. And I saw this guy wood carving. And well, that looks kind of cool. I'll try that. So I went out to the woods, and I got a bunch of wood, and I brought it back. I got a vise, and I started doing it. And I could do what he did. I mean, it was just as natural as can be. So anyway, so I started doing that, and I started a company called Tree People. Like I could carve your face in about 30 minutes and characterize you, just really give you some crazy character. So anyway, where am I headed?
And let me just tell you right now, we're playing a little montage of your work so that people can go, oh wait, no, this dude's for real. Like these are he's talking about humble beginnings here, but these are bronze works here. Like this is the real deal. So continue.
Okay, so I did this for almost 30 years. In 2010, now remember I've been out of the trade and everything else. In 2010, we lost my son. He was 19 years old. He was 2 months away from graduating in high school. In a He died in a freak Jeep rollover. He was in a back seat with a buddy, and the tire blew out. They were doing about 70, and it rolled. And the other boys were thrown out, and my son was stuck in the car, and it rolled with my son. So that was devastating, and
Wow.
it took me out. Of course, it took me totally out of everything. I lost my heart for artwork. I lost my heart for everything and everybody. And that's when I met Paul. Well, I met Paul before that because he would do Paul Lavella's with the art organization Operation Restored Wear.
Yeah.
So he would buy the angels that I was doing, the small ones, to give as gifts for or W grads, and stuff like that. So, and Levi would come out and meet with him, and he'd hear all the war stories, that Paul has, and so he was enthralled with Paul, which was really cool. So anyway, I had lost everything. I'd lost the will to live. I was suicidal, and so it was time to go back to work. And so the only thing I had to do was go back to the construction. So I picked up the phone and I said, "It's me. It's been 30 years." And they said, "Well, there's a big, big job up in Canada. Would you do that one?" And I said, "Yeah." Big oil refinery, 6,000 men. So I went
Wow.
up there, and and it's like they had 97 Greyhound buses with men in it from man camps. We'd unload,
Whoa.
go to work, we'd get back on the buses and go back to the camp. I mean, that was an everyday thing, and it was all 712s. You're working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was big money. And so anyway, this one day, we had probably only been there about a month, and this little guy comes walking up to me, and he goes, "Patrick." And I said, "Yeah." And it was Bart Stamper, the Vietnam vet, that led me to the Lord 30 years later in a foreign country on a job with
Wow.
2,000 men. Now,
Not a coincidence.
you can't, right? So,
Wow.
and so once again, God used him again in my life, and he helped me, he helped me quite a bit get my heart to where I could at least breathe and eat and talk again. So that was huge. That was huge.
Wow. Where did you intersect with the drop zone?
So I came home from a few other jobs in Alaska, and Paul had always, since the death of my son, he had always wanted me to do a drop zone, and I'm like, that's all
Yeah.
military. I'm not military. I was just not real comfortable with it. He goes, "Listen, you've got to come because you've got a really big wound in your heart." I said, "Well, I agree with that." So I agreed. I went to my first drop zone, and and like Paul said, it stopped the bleeding. It stopped the bleeding. I wasn't suicidal anymore. I didn't have a 45 in my mouth, and so thank God for ORW because it's basically saved my life with the Lord.
Yeah. Well, that's not surprising to me because I know what that experience is like. But could you, real quick, talk about like what was your experience of showing up there, and maybe just maybe some whatever you feel comfortable sharing about like how you met Jesus there.
Yeah, well, that was during the healing prayer. So that was I'd never seen anything like that what they did, before. I mean, that was all new.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty powerful stuff too. So, they go through some of their sessions, and remember, I'm like two years out of losing my son, so I'm still pretty much taken out of the game, walking in grief and having a hard time with it. And so Paul, he's so gracious and he's so gentleman for a man. He can be really gentle with your heart, and
Yeah.
when it I mean, he's an amazing guy. And he walked me through some of those things that, like core memories of the last time I saw my boy and all this stuff. And so,
Yeah. Wow.
what he does is he helps you go back in because there's no time with the Lord. So he goes back into those times like at the morgue and stuff, and you find Jesus in those places, and that's where Jesus heals those places. He heals those gaping wounds, and to where you can get on with life again.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I've had the honor and the privilege of going through a drop zone myself,
Mm.
and yeah, it's the kind of thing that we try to describe all the time here on the podcast, and it can't be described.
You can.
It's the kind of thing that you've definitely got to experience for
Uh,
yourself. And so let me just insert a quick commercial.
yeah, sure.
Um, Mark is talking about some serious wounds here. I mean, what he experienced, you can't imagine something much. Really, what would be more painful? And on top of that, I'm sure talking about an alcoholic father and a rough upbringing and all the fights and just there, he had to have brought a very battered, wounded heart into that experience, and Jesus met him there through the experience that we call a drop zone and brought healing. And that, like, if you go, wait a minute, I've got some wounds in my heart. If he can be healed, then maybe there's hope for me. Good news, it's available to you. It's available right now. You can go to www.operationrestoredwarrior.org. There is a link you can click to jump into one of the online programs. You could be starting your journey in 10 minutes from now. I mean, it's totally available to you. And you can also, there are also some other ways you could work towards a group event. And Mark's going to tell us a little bit more about what that looks like now. So you've been through this journey. It's changed your life. It's brought you healing and freedom. And then you want to bring that to other people. How did you link up with last week's guest, Rich Dunn? And we've heard the story from his point of view. Let's hear it from yours.
So, I some of my stories are pretty crazy because of the craziness of them. And Paul wanted me to be come into some of the drop zones as a facilitator after some training. So I did that for I think two or 3 years, and I would tell my story, which would open a door for other guys to crack their heart and say, well, if he's done this, well, he did this, it maybe I can crack my heart. And so that, but I saw what it was doing for men and what it did for my heart, especially. And I just wanted to spread the news. It's like having a cure to cancer and you want to tell everybody. And so that's basically what I did. I told everybody I'd run into about ORW.
You have been an ally and an advocate for a long time.
It's the real deal, man. It's the real deal. I mean, if you think you know God, you wait till you really meet him. Yeah. So yeah, so did that, and then I've always been an advocate and an ally, and always wanted to help get more guys into this. So we moved to South Carolina, which you can see behind me. We had a hurricane here. You can't see all the dead trees and all the stuff down over there.
Boy.
So anyway, I started going to a men's group at this church that we started to go to called Hope. That's where I met Rich Dunn, great pastor, great man, good guy. And our men's group called Wholehearted, they hadn't heard these things before. And so I kind of introduced them, there's an adventure to live, a battle to fight.
Yeah.
And so they're like, what? Wait, what? Back up, say all that. So I slowly kind of introduced ORW without introducing ORW. And then we had the opportunity to, Rich Dunn and I and Josh Crawford, we all flew to Colorado and we met with Paul. We did a lot of other things, but we met with Paul, which was cool, in his house, and just sit there one-on-one, boom, 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 questions and stuff. And now they're like, okay, we want to be part of this. We want to do this, and so now I've got, got that same heartfelt for men to get them restored and renewed. And I mean, there's nothing better than having a freedom in your heart. Wow. So we went back and we have a cadre, because our men's group has grown.
That's a good name.
Like that one. So we started that, and so it's 6 guys that we come up with plans and stuff to help with the 40 guys that we have in the men's meeting. And so we went through the LMS online, the ORW LMS.
Mm-hmm.
And we went through that ourselves,
Yeah, that's the online program that I was just talking about that you, listener, viewer, could be doing in just a few minutes.
Yes. And it's really, really good too. It's very well done. So we did that with the 6 of us. And then we said, you know what? Bells are going off. Let's do it for all of them. Let's do it for everybody. So then we did another drop zone with 18 guys. And then Paul heard about that and he's like, 18, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So this last one that we just did in North Carolina was 41 guys in total. That's with his team. So, and that's a lot. That's a lot of
It
guys.
is. It is.
I'm telling you, it was mind blowing because it doesn't matter if it's a stadium full of men. The Holy Spirit's going to come through every single time. He's going to come through. And we watched it. We watched it happen. We watched it work. We watched it. So we're really excited. We'd love
Wow.
even bigger venues, bigger, mass. It's so exciting to watch the Holy Spirit work on guys. I mean, it's like he's getting it. That guy's getting it. It's powerful.
Okay, so we've talked with Rich. It went really well. I want to dig into it from your perspective. So what we know of as the drop zone program, like you described, it's a pretty intimate experience. And I get what you're saying. Yeah, the Holy Spirit can move in a group of 50 guys as well as he can move in a group of 5 guys. But what did that look like? What are some of the stories of how people were impacted in that way?
Well, I know Rich told the story about the donkey.
Yes, he did.
Which is still an amazing story when you think about it. It's like Balaam. There's so many stories. Gosh, I mean, another guy who said, "Man, I don't know if I belong here. I'm not military." Just like, and I'm like, "Yeah, I get that. I get all that." And he got rocked. It just rocked. I mean, when I mean rocked, he took it all in, and it's like he took it all in, and you could tell in his heart he is a different guy. And we've been hearing stories of some of the men's wives, like what happened because this
What'd you do with my husband?
this brand new thing. We're getting that, So it's just an amazing program. I can't even explain it. Like you said, it's hard to explain how, why, and how the Holy Spirit does it all, but he does it. He works on our deep surgery, goes in there with a scalpel, cuts those big black parts off your heart,
Yeah.
restores them the way they're supposed to be.
Wow. So if you would talk a little bit about the online program that you experienced, not sitting in front of your computer, but with a group of guys. So
Yeah, I think
you're one of, I think there are only 2 of you who have had the experience of going to a drop zone in person, doing the online program, and being part of a large group event. So your perspective is really unique. So what do you think about that online program?
it's excellent. So it's simple. The cadre and I, we were all trying to figure out how we could tweak it, and no, that won't work. And we just came to say, you know what? Let the program do what the program's meant to do. And when we left it alone and tried to quit tweaking it, everything felt, everything was perfect. It was on us, as the guys trying to make it better was jacking it up. So just, like one of our guys, his name is Josh Spurgeon, and he goes, just let the program work. Everything will be fine. And so we're like, all right, we'll quit trying to tweak it, because we were trying to put slots in there with us speaking,
Yeah.
does. And yeah, it worked, but it's even just as good without somebody yakking away, so it just let the program do its thing and follow it, and take notes, because you're going to need them later, and you'll need them later in life. I still, to this day, go back to my old notes.
Yeah, I do too, from my drop zone. I really, really do. Well, man, what an amazing journey, a life journey. And what an amazing story. I want to thank you for putting together, along with Rich, this large group event at your church. But one thing that we're really doing at Operation Restored Warrior, we're looking for more of those. So what would you say to somebody who is maybe on staff at a church, or like deeply embedded in their home church, as everybody should be? What would you say about trying that out, taking the risk?
Yeah, like if you're a pastor, or if you're just a guy at a church, and you're listening to this, and you can get a hold of that LMS, the online program, get 3 or 4 of you guys together, your good buddies that you like, and go through it together. Maybe it takes more than a couple of days. It took us 3. Go through it.
Oh yeah.
And when you go through it, you're going to be on board. You're going to want to share it like I did with everybody I ran into. I mean, I wanted to share it with every, everybody for years and years and years, and still doing it. So that's what I would suggest. And then if you think that's good for your church, bring it into a bigger group and tell the pastor or whatever, and say, hey, we got a men's guy. And then you can say what we all say at ORW. I know a guy.
Yeah, that guy is a pretty remarkable guy. When he shows up, everything changes. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's an anointed man. We're talking about Paul Lavelle. So
yeah. All right.
But that's what I would suggest. I'd start small, and then if your guys are digging it, which I know they will, they're gonna say, let's get even more guys and get more guys and start a men's group and start a weekly, like we have a weekly men's group. We all meet on Thursday. We go through whatever we want to go through that has something to do with being a better husband, better man, better father, and just a better guy,
Yeah.
And those are the things we study out. We went through the book, we studied out David. I mean, he was flawed character, but he was BA, man. I mean,
yeah,
he did not take guff. We're not supposed to take guff. We're warriors. We are warriors for Christ. And so, pull them up, man. Let's get on with the battle. Let's get on. But you have to be equipped, and this will help you be equipped spiritually.
Yeah, and you can't fight a battle when you're really just a casualty, and that's really the big deal with the R3 podcast and the whole mission of Operation Restore Warrior: rescue, rebuild, restore. If you've not heard this explanation before, let me just run through it again. Those of us who have sustained wounds to the heart, which is, I believe, to some degree, everybody alive. We say this all the time. You don't get through this life without taking some hits. And those heart wounds that we compartmentalize or stuff or numb through drinking or drugs or various pursuits, those cripple us. They're spiritual wounds. And there can come a point where we need a rescue. We can't live the fullness of life that Jesus promised because we're walking wounded, and we haven't been able to plug into the full healing that he makes available. And so that's what the drop zone experience does. It's a rescue. In that drop zone experience that comes in and picks you up as wounded as you are, whatever condition you are in, there's a process of rebuilding. And that rebuilding process culminates in the total healing of your heart. Now, you may think that, no, you don't know what I've been through. And I don't. But if you've been watching this podcast, you have seen some people who've been through it, including my friend Mark here. And if healing can come to him and all the other people we've talked to, then why not take a shot? Because the end of that rebuilding process and the healing of your heart is restore. And when we say restore, it's restored to fullness of life, restored to your purpose, restored to the reason that God made you and put you on this earth, restored to what's going to be more satisfying to you than any other existence that you could eke out on your own. And so that is available to you. Again, OperationRestoredWarrior.org. You can go there. You can click the online programs. There's also a link where you can click to get in the queue for one of our in-person programs, and maybe take Mark's advice and see if you can do this as a group and then maybe at your church. So that's the challenge. All right, Mark, that's it for this episode of the R3 podcast. Do you have any parting words? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Just build your foundation to where you can stand on something again. You can't, if you're not standing on a good foundation, you're not going to be able to, walk forward. So that's it. What you just said you nailed it.
Well, from you, a great nugget of wisdom as we part. So folks, That's the end of this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. And more than that, I hope you go to the website, and we will see you next week on the R3 podcast.